Okay, so we've collected sonnets. Yeah, was it just really, really hard? Did anybody think it was just horribly, brutally hard? Is it harder than just putting your thoughts down any way you want? Yeah, squeezing them into a form is difficult. Yeah, Dominic. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, you always have the option of choosing a new topic. But okay, if you're just like, that's the topic I've got to do. Yeah, some topics are harder than others, definitely. Hopefully you spent some time this last week with John Donne and his Batter My Heart and the other one that's escaping me, which one you had? No, the other John Donne sonnet. I'm worried about my brain today. Mm-hmm. Oh, Death Be Not Proud. Death Be Not Proud, yes. I'm not going to tell you every week to do this and remind you, but it's just a general standing request that when we go over poems, that you read them again throughout the week. Every day would be awesome. At least a couple times, because the first time through, you never really notice the little things that make it amazing. We are going to meet a new guy writing more sonnets this week, John Milton. One of these I just really love. This might be a candidate for putting down in your commonplace book or memorizing, I suppose. John Milton lived during the time of England's Civil War, when they captured their king and chopped his head off. And then they put a regime in place for 20 years under Oliver Cromwell. And Milton worked for Cromwell's regime. He worked for the Puritans and wrote sort of what we would call propaganda for them. But had some weird ideas and wrote this whole treatise about why it's okay to divorce your wife. Apparently he didn't get along with his wife very well. But the thing he's most famous for is writing a very, very long epic poem called Paradise Lost that I really toyed with having you guys read, but it's pretty difficult. And I just didn't think we'd get as much out of it as we would out of some other things. John Milton, in addition to writing epic poems, and that's not the only one he wrote, and working for the government, also started to go blind. He lost his sight. And his first sonnet is about that. So that gives you a hint. You know something of what it's about, but I want to ask you, why he's upset about the fact that he's going blind, other than the obvious. And what he learns about it. Right? That's what I'm looking for. Let's read it. It's on page 7. When I consider how my light is spent, ere half my days in this dark world and wide, and that one talent, which is death to hide, lodged with me useless, though my soul more bent to serve there with my Maker, and present my true account, lest he returning chide, doth God exact day labor, light denied? I fondly ask, but patience, to prevent that murmur, soon replies. God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts, who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. His state is kingly. Thousands at his bidding speed and post o'er land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait. This is a hard poem. So maybe you see why we didn't read Paradise Lost. What does he feel like his blindness is, what problem is it causing for him?
He feels like he's becoming useless.
I'm useless. He says in the first 4 lines, that one talent which is death to hide, is lodged with me useless. What do you suspect his one talent, with a capital T, might be? Like writing. This is the guy who writes epic poetry and political propaganda. He writes for a living. It's hard to write when you're blind. We all know. Do you ever do the thing when you're little? Maybe now. Close your eyes and see if you can legibly write something. It's always terrible, isn't it? How can I write anymore? Does he learn? What does he learn? What is his life going to be good for now if he can't write? Does God need him to write? Does God need anything? Does God have other people running all over the world serving him? Yeah, it says thousands at his bidding, speed and post o'er land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait. Does God need us to be busy for him all the time? What does he really need us to do? What is the one thing needful? You know, Mary and Martha. What did Mary pick? What was the one thing needful? What did she do that Martha didn't do? She sat and listened. She sat and paid attention and listened. And here, move over a little bit. Oh, except then I'm away from my camera. I want to sit where I can see the Beaties. Okay. Oh, I'll stand up again in a minute, but I need to sit down for a minute. He says, God, my maker, is returning and may chide. Do you know what it means to chide someone?
Does it mean like to confide with?
It doesn't. What does it mean to chide?
Kind of like, you chide your child for doing something wrong.
It means to correct them. God's going to come back and correct me because I'm not doing the thing he gifted me to do. And then he has this quote. He says, this is what I would ask God. Does God exact day labor, light denied? What am I supposed to do? Is he going to be like a slave master with his whip, telling us, work harder? I can't see anything. It's all dark for me. But patience answers him and says, you know, God doesn't really need anything you have to offer, which is sort of mildly depressing, maybe. Like initially it might make you feel like you're not very important, but it's also very freeing. All he wants me to do is listen. I have to busy around like Martha making dinner. Just have to listen. I love this because I'm a Martha. I would be a Milton. Like, what? There's only one thing I know how to do, and now I can't do it. Well, God says just stand and wait. And I always get to that last line, and I think of, in movies, in books, they're sitting at the big feast, and the servants are standing next to them, right, and waiting to take the dishes away, or they always have an attendant with them. And the attendant's main job, it seems to be, is stand there and do nothing until somebody's, bring me another whatever, bring me a napkin. And then they do it, and then they just stand there. And that's their job, to just stand there and wait. I don't know. I like that. Do you know that there have been really some fabulous writers who have gone blind, and they still wrote, they did it all in their head. Like they would wait for somebody to dictate it to, but they would compose whole just pages and pages of verse and keep it in their heads until somebody came that could take it down. I can't even imagine. All right, that's a tough one. Let's look at Sonnet 18. It says it's on the late massacre in Piedmont. That sounds pleasant. This one's not so hard to understand, but you might like to know that obviously John Milton is living during a time when the Reformation has already happened. So there's just wars and wars and more wars all over Europe all the time, deciding, are you going to be Protestant, or are you going to be Catholic? It's part of what the English Civil War was about. So the background is Piedmont is an area of Italy. It was very strongly Catholic. And on a particular day, a bunch of Protestants, granted they were kind of heretic Protestants, they were Waldensians, they killed 2,000 of them. The Catholics just rose up and killed 2,000 of them. Just in case either side feels smug, we should also remember that in lots of places Protestants rose up and killed thousands of Catholics. So nobody gets off scot-free on this story. So this is just sort of a lament on the people the Protestants killed in Piedmont. Avenge, O Lord, thy slaughtered saints, whose bones lie scattered on the alpine mountains cold, even them who kept thy truth so pure of old, when all our fathers worshipped stocks and stones. Forget not, in thy book record their groans, who were thy sheep, and in their ancient fold slain by the bloody Piedmontese that rolled mother with infant down the rocks. Their moans the vales redoubled to the hills, and they to heaven. Their martyred blood and ashes sow o'er all the Italian fields, where still doth sway the triple tyrant, that from these may grow 100-fold, who having learnt thy way, early may flee the Babylonian woe. He wants him to do something with the ashes of all these martyrs. What does he want him to do with them? He wants God to do something with them. Sow them through the Italian fields. And why do you think he wants him to do that? What's going to happen to them when he does that? Yes, but so do seeds. But they do something else too. They grow. And so he says that from these may grow 100-fold. Who having learnt thy way early may flee the Babylonian woe. We also need to know something else. Who is the triple tyrant? The Pope had a 3-tiered tiara. The Pope is the triple tyrant. Basically, he's praying for more Protestants, right? That they will flee the Babylonian, the Antichrist, the horrible Pope in Rome. They will flee him. Some of you read this with me a couple of years ago. The Church Father Tertullian, who famously said, the blood of martyrs is seed, right? The seed of the church. And so John Milton's copying that, right? The ashes of these martyrs will be the seed of more Protestants. That's what he's hoping for, right? I noticed this. Whenever a line of poetry stops in the middle of a sentence, if you know what I mean, like you get to the end of the line, but the sentence goes into the next line, you always kind of stop and wonder, why did he do that? It might be because the meter did it. I did it once in my silly little sonnet, and it was basically because to make the meter turn out right, I had no grand plan. Milton's a much better writer than me. And notice how their moans stops at the end of a sentence. I'm going to read that starting, slain by the bloody Piedmontese that rolled mother with infant down the rocks, their moans. And it ends the line, the vales redoubled to the hills. Can you think of a reason, a poetic, literary reason, to stop for a moment with their moans? Does it make you feel anything to stop there? What do you think, Dominic? It puts tons of attention on their moans. It's just hanging out there by itself at the end of the line, right? You kind of pause for a moment on their moans. And so sometimes it's just because I had more words to write, so I go to the next line. But a lot of times it's not. And I think in this case it's not. That he really puts an emphasis. And it ends. What else ended? The line ends, but what else ended? Mother and infant being rolled down the rocks. What ended there? Their lives. Their moans. And ends. It's a little creepy if you think about it too much, but I think that's what Milton was doing here. It's very smart. It's very good writing. So these are a little more depressing. I don't know. I told you I like the blindness one, just because it reminds me that if I think I'm not doing good enough job, like God doesn't need me to do anything. He can do everything himself. I'm only just supposed to listen and obey. And then I did okay. All right, spend some time this week with John Milton. I want to dive in. We didn't have tons of time with Bunyan last week. So I want to look at the rest of the second half. But I also need to take some time and tell you about the next thing we're going to read. It's a little more, it's not nearly as long. Give you the good news first. Not nearly as long, but it's a little more difficult. The next thing. But it's super duper duper important. So I want to make sure we talk about it a little bit. Jonathan and Charlotte, do you mind if I sit down? Like, you can come sit here if you want to. I hate to just sit in a place where you can't see me, but I've got the camera set up. All right, let me bring my stuff over here. Faithful and Christian get to a place called Vanity Fair. It's a fair, right? There's merchants, selling things. What is vanity?
Love of self.
Okay, we sometimes get the idea, like Narcissus, if you know the story of Narcissus, who just couldn't stop looking at himself in the pool of water, we would say he was vain. But, in the book of Ecclesiastes it depends on the translation you're using, but in King James, vanity, vanity, all is vanity, says Solomon. And he doesn't really mean that everybody's looking at themselves in mirrors. If anybody knows, what is Ecclesiastes about? What else can vanity? It does mean that, but what else can vanity mean?
Material things in general, stuff.
Yeah, and why are they vain? Why are they vanity?
Because there's
You gonna fight about it?
Because to want to own them is vain, because we only really want to own them for like status or like position or
our betterment.
Yeah. Yeah, vanity means uselessness, pointlessness. In that, and honestly, I have no idea how the two meanings are related. I can make up a pretty story, I'm sure, that may or may not be true. That it's being all puffed up with your looks is vanity in the sense that you're going to get old. You're not going to look like that forever. Yeah, so that vainglory, right. But in an old-fashioned sense, vanity generally means useless. Vanity, and here's where Niels comes in, Vanity Fair is vanity because the crud they sell is not useful for any lasting purpose. So I think, okay, Vanity Fair, 93. Is there a list of stuff you can purchase there? Oh, here we go. Almost 5,000 years ago, there were pilgrims walking to the celestial city, as these two honest persons are, and Beelzebub, Apollyon, and Legion, with their companions, perceiving by the path that the pilgrims made that their way to the city lay through this town of vanity, they contrived here to set up a fair wherein should be sold all sorts of vanity, and that it should last all the year long. Therefore, at this fair are all such merchandise sold as houses, lands, trades, places, honors, preferments, titles, countries, kingdoms, lusts, pleasures, and delights of all sorts, as whores, bawds, wives, husbands, children, masters, servants, lives, blood, bodies, souls, silver, gold, pearls, precious stones, and whatnot. Everything you could possibly have in this world, including some good ones. We'll have to file that away. Because there's nothing wrong with husbands and wives and children. There's certainly nothing wrong with, having enough money to live on. So we'll have to think about why those things are vanity. And moreover, at this fair, there is at all times to be seen jugglings, cheats, games, plays, fools, apes, knaves, and rogues, and that of every kind. Now, this is a little nice dig. So those Catholic students, you can just hate on Bunyan just a little bit here. It says there's a Britain row, a French row, an Italian row, the Spanish row, the German row, all the nations. As in other fairs, some one commodity is the chief of all the fair. So the ware of Rome and all her merchandise is greatly promoted at this fair. Remember, Bunyan is very not Catholic, right? He's very Puritan Protestant, so he puts that in. So everything one might want to have in this world is available at Vanity Fair. Why do you think that Apollyon and Legion and Beelzebub, why did they build this fair right on the path that they know pilgrims take? What do you think their goal was?
To distract them, maybe.
To distract them.
If everything they could possibly want there, that there's going to be something they want there.
And maybe what might they do after they get there?
They might just not leave.
Why keep going? Got everything I need right here. This is a very shrewd thing Bunyan does here, because it makes me stop immediately and think, oh, how satisfied am I in my cozy little house in Vanity Fair? Are you guys familiar with the fact that this phrase was used, it's a magazine. There's a magazine called Vanity Fair. It's like a fashion, it's very Vanity Fairish. I've never been quite sure if they were poking fun at themselves. Why you would, kind of point out the things we're peddling are vanity. That doesn't seem like a good sales play. This was the first question I asked you guys. What finally enrages the men of Vanity Fair to the point that they want to kill Christian and Faithful? What will Christian and Faithful, what do they do or what do they not do?
They don't buy anything.
They don't buy it. One chanced, mockingly, beholding the carriage of the men, to say unto them, what will ye buy? They see Christian and Faithful and they look, they're not dressed the best. They look like out-of-towners. What will ye buy? But they, looking gravely upon him, said, we buy the truth. At that, at that there was an occasion taken to despise the men the more. Some mocking, some taunting, some speaking reproachfully, and some calling upon others to smite them. And the men told them, they brought them before judges. The men told them that they were pilgrims and strangers in the world, and that they were going to their own country, which was the heavenly Jerusalem, and that they had given no occasion to the men of the town, nor yet to the merchandisers, thus to abuse them, and to let them in their journey, which means stop them in their journey. Except it was, for that when one asked them what they would buy, they said they would buy the truth. This is the only charge, right? They won't buy our stuff. And what do they do with them? What do they do? What do the men?
They throw them in the cage.
Yeah. They first of all imprison them, and they get a boatload of witnesses. We're going to air quote witnesses. And I noticed this. I'm not totally sure. Well, let me read some of the charges. They not only condemn all our laudable doings, but us in the doing of them. They don't just criticize what we do, they indirectly criticize us. Someone else says, they say we do worship in vain. He, Christian and faithful, hath spoken contemptibly of the judge's honorable friends. They have railed on you, my lord, the judge. They won't buy anything but the truth, and they criticize us. Here, let's stop for a minute. I don't know how much time you spend on the internet. Hopefully not very much. But you probably have picked up on this just from being in the world and being the age you are. Do people seem today, just people in general, seem content to just hear someone else's opinion and say, well, that's the way you see it, and this is the way I see it? Do you know enough about like how people are acting in the world today to be able to answer that question? I don't know.
Some people can go way over the top, maybe.
Hey, for example, let me do a better example. Say you're with a group of people. Okay, this is an example that very well could happen and may have already happened. And they're going to go see a movie that you really consider not a movie that anybody should put in front of their eyes, that a Christian person just doesn't need to be with. You know, it's all your friends, whatever. Maybe you don't have friends that would go see that, but you know what I mean. You're in a group, and the peer pressure is hard and very strong. And and if you say no, and they say, well, why don't you want to go? Well, I just don't want to see that kind of movie. That's just a statement, right? Think about this. I don't want to see that kind of movie. Are you telling anyone what to do when you make that statement? No. You're making a statement of fact. I do not want to see that. How do you think maybe the group of people may perceive what you have said? In other words, might they feel insulted? Yeah. What? You're too good? You're too good to go to the movies that we go to? What, do you think we're bad people? 'Cause that's what happens next in this story, in this conversation, right? And it was happening 400 years ago in Bunyan's time. When you say, I don't want what you're peddling to the world doesn't say, oh, okay, I guess I'll just go peddle it to someone else. It says, well, you got a lot of nerve. Really? You think we're bad people? That's what the people of Vanity Fair do. But he criticizes us. Did we hear them criticize? They just kept saying, we buy the truth. We're looking for truth. That's what we're in the market for. And if you don't have it here, we'll have to just press on. And they're insulted. It's always the same. Anyway, I always think that part's spot on. It's timeless, because that's the reaction. When you want to live a certain way, somebody will say, you're insulting them. And then this, I don't know how many times I've read Pilgrim's Progress, but I don't think I ever noticed this until this read through. Listen to this. Then the judge called to the jury, who all this while stood by to hear and observe. Now, I want to read what he says to the jury, and then I want you to see if there's anything kind of not okay here. I may skip a little part. Gentlemen of the jury, you see this man, about whom so great an uproar hath been made in this town, and you have also heard what these worthy gentlemen have witnessed against him. Also you have heard his reply and confession. It lieth now in your breast to hang him or save his life. But yet I think meet to instruct you in our law. Okay, so far he's okay. You heard what they said. You heard what they said. It's up to you. But I want to tell you a few things before. There was an act made in the days of Pharaoh the Great, servant to our prince. that lest those of a contrary religion should multiply and grow too strong for him, their males should be thrown into the river. There was also an act made in the days of Nebuchadnezzar the Great, another of his servants, that whoever would not fall down and worship his golden image should be thrown in the fiery furnace. There was also an act made in the days of Darius, that whoso for some time called upon any god but him should be cast into a lion's den. Now, the substance of these laws this rebel hath broken, not only in thought, which is not to be borne, but also in word and deed. He didn't worship and bow down to the powers that be. Okay, so far this seems okay. He's just advising them, this is the law, this is what the law is. Now listen to this. For that of Pharaoh, his law was made upon a supposition to prevent mischief. No crime being yet apparent. He threw those babies in the river, they didn't do anything. But here is a crime apparent. For the second and third, you see, he disputeth against our religion, and for the treason that he hath already confessed, he deserveth to die the death. What did the judge just do to the jury?
He just told them that they should die.
Yeah, he just said, FYI, the verdict is guilty. Before you go and deliberate, the verdict is guilty. They've been prejudged. They're already judged before the jury goes out. The jury is useless. They're vanity. It's very suitable that this jury is in Vanity Fair because they're a useless jury. Yeah. So what happens to Faithful? He dies. Is his death vain? What happens? I didn't ask you this question, but does anybody remember what happens because Faithful dies? Okay, he goes straight to heaven. So he gets to the celestial city first. Do you remember anything else? Well, I'll read it and then you tell me. Now I saw in my dream that Christian went not forth alone, for there was one whose name was Hopeful, being so made by the beholding of Christian and Faithful in their words and behavior and their sufferings at the fair, who joined himself unto him. Why did Hopeful join Christian?
Because of their example.
Because of their example. Right. Strew those ashes, right? And let more of them rise up. More of them rise up. He gets another companion. And it says that, thus one died to bear testimony to the truth, and another rises out of his ashes to be companion with Christian. You know, I gave you that months and months and months ago. I put that poem in there, and I had no idea we would be reading that passage and the strewing the ashes of the massacre in Piedmont. I didn't know. Okay. Let's move on to the second question. They are following the path, and then suddenly they notice that the path on the other side of the fence looks so much easier to walk on. It runs right by the fence, you know. So it's not like we're going to get lost or anything. But does the path stay by the fence? It doesn't. It starts, and suddenly they are nabbed by the giant despair and thrown into a castle. Do you remember what the castle's name is? Doubting Castle. Now, I wanted to mention this last week, and I think I forgot. I think I told the Wednesday kids. When Christian and Faithful when they first met up, after they got through the Valley of the Shadow of Death, you know, and they had a talk, and Christian said, "Oh, man, what did you think of that Apollyon? How'd you do there? How'd you get through that?" And Faith was like, "You know, I didn't really meet him. I met, what was it? It wasn't despair. Discontent. Did we talk about this last week? Oh, did we? Oh, maybe it's the Wednesday kids I didn't tell. Discontent isn't the same as despair exactly, but they're in the same family, I feel like, you know what I mean? Discontent is a little bit, despair is, well, what does despair literally mean? So my Latin students, please tell me what despair. Despero. Well, sparrow. We want sparrow. No hope. No, it literally means to have no hope. Why, maybe this is painfully obvious, but I don't know. Why does the giant despair live in Doubting Castle?
Because you doubt there's any hope.
Okay, because what,
When you start to doubt, it leads to.
okay, it doesn't start out, you don't just wake up one morning in despair.
Sort of like doubting.
You start doubting certain things. And you got to remember, what is this book about? It's not about life in general. What specific part of our life is this book about? Our spiritual. It's a spiritual journey, right? So it doesn't mean you despairing of, I'm never going to get a job, or I'm never going to find the perfect spouse, or, something like that. It's despair. Let me ask this. What does spiritual despair look like? How would one spiritually despair, or what would you despair of?
Whatever you were following wasn't true.
Okay, it's not real. Like, what if there is no celestial city? What if evangelist is just a cheat? What if it's all made up? What if the Bible is just a book written by a bunch of people? It's just random people. All right? So you start to doubt. And then you start following. And you don't just jump the fence and run out into the field, right? We generally didn't just wake up one day and question everything we've ever believed, right? It's like you go over the fence. And I can still see the road. It's right there. I'm just kind of walking on the other side of the fence because it seems fine over here. It's this gradual. And then suddenly, what if my life has no meaning? What if life in general has no meaning? There's no point to anything. Why do I even get up in the morning? You see? It doesn't happen, it doesn't happen the day you jump the fence. But it leads there. And do you remember, we didn't really talk about this at all. There's way more that we could talk about that we can't. He visited a place called the Interpreter's House. This was right after he went through the gate, and he fell asleep, and lost his scroll and everything. And he went to this place, and they showed him parables, maybe like little pictures. Like there was a fire that no matter how much they tried to put the fire out, it just kept blazing. And then they took Christian behind, and there was a guy pouring oil into the fire from behind. I love that one. It's like, that fire of love for God, they can't put it out. The demons can't put it out because the Holy Spirit's just feeding oil into it from behind the scenes, and he can't even see it. And he sees all these things. And one of them, he sees a man in a cage, and he can't get out. And he's in despair. And he says, no, I can't be forgiven. God doesn't love me. I've done too terrible things. It's just, no, I'm over the edge. God can never forgive me. I'm like, well, can't you just get out? Well, you can't get out if you don't believe you can ever be forgiven, right? Does that make sense? So this is kind of a weird thing, and it's sort of grotesque. He keeps telling them to commit suicide and things like that, the giant despair. But it's really spot on. And he has a wife. I'll be totally honest. I had to look this word up. Diffidence. His wife's name is Diffidence. I know that must mean something. Here's the definition. Modesty or shyness resulting from a lack of self-confidence. Diffidence is, oh, little old me, I'm not worthy. I can't do that. I'm not good enough to do that. Do you see how it's related to doubt and despair? Right? Complete lack of self-confidence in one's gifts or abilities. That's his wife's name. Yeah, and she just basically says, yeah, go show him a noose. Go show him give him some poison. See if they'll get rid of themselves. They just keep tempting them to commit suicide. But here's the question I asked you. What gives the giant despair fits and why?
Sunshine.
Sunshine. Oh my gosh, it's just this silly thing. It says, with that he looked ugly upon them, and rushing to them had doubtless made an end of them himself, but that he fell into one of his fits. For he sometimes in sunshiny weather fell into fits, and lost for a time the use of his hands. And you get to this and you think, what? But see, you have to think about the allegory a little, right? Why does sunshiny weather give despair fits? Why do you think? Dominic?
Kind of represents to us a new day, a new chance, a second chance.
Daylight. Think of everything that light and sunlight and day mean to us, right? The time when we can see things, the time when we can walk clearly, the time that is safer. Jesus, who is the light of the world, it's all tied up in that. When sun shines, despair weakens. But here's the thing. I don't know if any of you have ever been despairing or had family members, but honest to goodness, when you literally go out and get some sunshine, you feel better, right? You're cooped up in a dark room or whatever. This is why people get kind of nutso in the winter when it's a really hard winter and we're cooped up inside all the time and we can't get any sun. I mean, you know we do it, right? You just get kind of grumbly and everything, oh, it's going to be like this forever. I'm so sick and tired of this room, and you despair. So it could be even literal. In sunshiny weather, despair has fits, but I think it's a lot more than that too. I think it's all those things, including God, that we associate with light. So what is the name of the key that gets you out of Doubting Castle? Neil. Promise. What promise? What do you think that means? How is that the key?
Is it like a promise of hope, maybe?
Whose promise? God's promise. I will never leave you nor forsake you. And lo, I will be with you even to the end of the age. Promise. Where I go, you will be with me also. So how do we ever get stuck in Doubting Castle if we have that all the time? Christian had the blasted key in his pocket the whole time. It's like, oh, wait a minute. After being beaten to a pulp numerous times, I just happen to have a key that opens every single door and gate in the castle. How did he forget that he had a key?
When you're in doubt, you forget. Maybe he even doubted that he had it.
Maybe he doubted the promises. Maybe he doubted he had the key. Yeah. You have the key. But you have to believe the promises are true, right? So the moment that doubt comes in, it's like it hides the key. Hides the key. So I don't remember. Does anybody remember how? Does something happen to him that he remembers the key? I wrote down the page number here. It does. Oh, it does. Well, on Saturday, I never noticed this before either. On Saturday, about midnight, they began to pray and continued in prayer till almost break of day. Now a little before it was day, good Christian, as one half amazed, brake out into this passionate speech. What a fool, quoth he, am I, thus to lie in a stinking dungeon, when I may as well walk at liberty. I have a key in my bosom called promise, that will, I am persuaded, open any lock in Doubting Castle. What were they doing right before he realized? They're praying all night. They're praying. Here's the question. They're in despair and they're doubting. Why are they praying?
Is it like being hopeful?
They're being hopeful. Well, I got nothing to lose. if he is there and he can hear me, I might as well try. Does that make sense to you guys? And it flips the doubt. Flips the doubt. Do you know who Pascal is? Blaise Pascal? He was a French mathematician, mostly, but he also a philosopher. And this famous thing called Pascal's wager. Maybe you've heard of Pascal's wager. He said, if I follow God and obey him and I'm wrong, I haven't really lost anything. Maybe a little bit of fun I could have had in life, you know, some possessions, maybe, you know, some stuff I'm not going to do that I could have done. But if you don't follow him and I am right, you've lost everything. If I follow him, yeah, C.S. Lewis takes right from Pascal. If I follow him, the worst case, I die and there's an end to it and nothing happens. I was wrong. I deprived myself of a little bit of fun along the way. But if I'm right, I win the jackpot. And you lose everything. That's Pascal's wager. And so I feel like maybe they're doing something like that. You know what? We might as well pray. We got nowhere to go. We're locked in a dungeon. Let's give it a shot. And he realizes the key. Okay, guys. It's time for the bonus question. I have no reward except my eternal gratitude for someone with a brilliant reason why this happens, okay? They are with the shepherds in the Delectable Mountains. They can see the gate of the celestial city, right? They can see it from where they are. They've been through this whole trip. When they were about to depart, one of the shepherds gave them a note of the way. Another of them bid them beware of the flatterer. The third bid them to take heed that they slept not upon enchanted ground. And the fourth bid them Godspeed. So I awoke from my dream. And I slept and dreamed again, and saw the same two pilgrims going down the mountain. Mr. Bunyan, why? Did anybody come up with some brilliant reason why he has the author wake and then sleep again? Because as far as I noticed, this is the only time it happens. He says numerous times, and I saw in my dream, but I don't think anywhere else he says, and I woke, and then I went right back to sleep and slept again. And my dream started right at the exact place where I left off before. What do you got for me, guys? Save me from my everlasting disturbance. Okay, yeah.
Just God was showing him he needed to see for his future.
Do you think there's a reason that there needed to be a break in it? Do you think is there something different about what happened before and what happened maybe after? Going off that, so he showed him what he needed to know. Is he showing something different after he goes to sleep again, do you think?
Afterward, does he despair or doubt anymore? Or is there still?
Well, they get caught by the flatterer. You know, they get the guy, he ties them up in a net. He leads them off the path. And they also meet the guy named Atheist, I think, who says, oh, there is no celestial city. You guys are bonkers. So there are, what do you want to say, problems afterwards still? But look at Noah said, this is all supposed to teach us something. And I'd have to think on that. Like, did he learn different things before? Is he learning different things now? I don't know, but that's something to think about. What do you think, Neil?
My thought was like the difference of the obstacles they encounter is different.
How do you think they're different?
It's like before the Vanity Fair, and then it seems like I was thinking like if there was a difference in the way that they were tempted, as to when you progress, they were tempted by the different means. So like it was all like, oh, so you think you're better and stuff. Mostly before, most people tell like Apollyon, he was trying to like tell him that he wasn't good enough for heaven because of this and that. But then whereas when they passed that mountain, it was mostly like people, like the atheists, trying to convince them logical means,
Oh.
whereas the other one was appealing to materialistic ideas, and the other one was logical means to stop them from going to the.
Yeah.
Whereas like the other one was like the flatterers, and like he flatters you with your how high you've gotten, how humble you are.
Yeah.
So material and then your character.
Yeah, no, yeah, material and then more like spiritual temptations instead. The difference. Like,
Because they're very close at this point.
yeah.
And they've already seen it from a distance. So you can take that allegorically however you want. I mean, it could be like you're getting old, and so I can attest to the fact that, as time passes, you start thinking more about the fact that you just don't have that much time left. You don't know how much, but I have a lot less than I used to have. And now 20 years doesn't sound like a lot, and in 20 years I'll be almost 80. It's like I may have 20 years, I may not have 20 years. And you start thinking about it. So I suppose if you're in that mindset, like I'm going for the goal now, maybe if I'm going to get bumped off the path, it does require different temptations, we'll say, or means. That's pretty good. I put both of those together. I need to learn different things because maybe I need to learn how to counter different temptations. I like this. Mine was very shallow. The only one. Just it jolts me when he says that because it reminds me that it's not really happening. I mean, I didn't think it was really happening, but even in the book, it's not really happening, if you know what I mean. Let's hold that. I want to circle back around and about not really happening. I want to revisit that, but let's just do this is the last question, right? There's nothing on the back page? Yes. This is pretty obvious. What is the river they have to cross to reach the celestial city, and why does it vary in depth? For some people it's deep, and some people can kind of wade across easily. What is the river?
I believe it is depth.
It's depth. You don't get there until you cross the river. Why isn't it equally deep for everyone?
Some people it's hard, some people it's easy.
What could be an example of it being easy?
Like, you completely accept that you're gonna die. Like, you just don't really fear it. You just accept it.
There's another, this is kind of morbid, but there's another way it could be really easy too.
Like being holy or
Yeah, but this is not a deep answer at all that I'm.
just like a quick painless.
Yeah, like truck hits you. Over. You never knew. The proverbial, he never knew what hit him. You know what I mean? There's no fear, there's no terror. I got hit by a car once, crossing the street, and it knocked me out, and I woke up in the hospital. And I mean, I broke some major things. It was not very pleasant at all, so don't run out in front of cars. But the point, I thought about this. This happened a lot of years ago now. But I've often thought about that. I thought, if I just woke up in heaven, I never would have known what hit me. Like, boom, done. No pain, nothing. And then some people, it's this slow it doesn't seem fair, I just found out that a lady I've known for, 30 years has breast cancer. His chemo starts Thursday for her. How is that even fair? Well, it's not fair. You know what I mean?
But God
But-
gives only suffering that you personally could handle.
And suffering, I believe that we need, right? Like we need to learn something. But yeah, this used to fascinate me as a child, like the river of death, and it just scared me, But the older I get, the more I'm like, okay, it's all right. I can deal with that, But Christian is the one who freaks out a little bit. It's like, hopeful, I'm sinking. Like, no, I can feel the bottom. I can touch the bottom here. You're good. I gotcha. All right. So I said we were going to circle back to it's not really happening. And how is Christianity like a journey? I said that when we read an allegory, we don't want to say, oh, it's a puzzle. I have to figure out what does this stand for? What does that stand for? But it's more, how does it illuminate what really is? So instead of saying, how is this journey like life? Let's ask, how is life? How is the Christian life? Because we said it was spiritual. How is it like a journey? How does a journey help us understand living the Christian life better? What do you think, Dominic?
Journey lets us see different things from different perspectives.
Okay.
Many, like, see how different people live, how many, like, how different their cultures and, like, their daily lives are compared to ours.
And how would we translate that into spiritual? What's the equivalent, the spiritual equivalent of like new experiences and new people? What do you think?
Well, if we gain new experiences, we can, like, affirm our own beliefs by, like, putting, like, what if I was like this, or like, what if I did this instead? How would I feel? How would I be? Would I be happy? Would I be having a terrible life? Would I be in a good position? Would I be dead, or would I be alive?
So spiritually, so in a physical journey, we would physically meet those people, right? We'd travel to new locations and we'd meet new people and see new landscapes and stuff. In a spiritual journey, we might not be physically meeting those people. Do you see what I mean? Because it's all happening inside of us. But what would those people and places be, but not material people and places?
I mean, we can meet, like, thoughts and ideas, or to, like, simply just, temptations, or, even you can, like, hear some, like, words from someone long ago that could completely change your life.
There's a famous sonnet that I'm not making you read. Okay, I don't think I'm making you read. Don't totally remember what's in there. But anyway, it's about a guy who, there's no way to say this and make it sound more trite and stupid than it really is. But he's talking about the first time he read a certain translation of the Iliad. See, and you're already laughing. No, it's called On First Looking in Chapman's Homer. Chapman was the translator. And he says, when I first read this particular, he said, I'd read other versions, but never had the verse sung so clear as when I looked into Chapman's Homer. And then he said, in this big, long simile, it was like the first guy to cross the Isthmus of Panama and see the Pacific Ocean. But he says it was Balboa, but it wasn't Balboa or something. You know what I mean? He gets the wrong explorer, but it's totally fine, because we understand what he means. He says it's like going and then seeing a completely new, undiscovered vista before me. That's what it was like when I first looked in this book. But of course, he didn't physically go exploring, right? He just said, suddenly I was hit with new experiences and new ideas. That was just like if I had traveled somewhere. And I think, that goes along with what Dominic was saying. When you travel, do you stay in the same place very long generally? No, we're generally on the move, aren't we? We might have a few nights here, a few nights there. How is life like that? How is our spiritual life? I mean, life in general may be like that. Okay, I'll give it to Dominic again.
In our journey, the spiritual journey, we rarely remain on the same ideas for very long. Like, you have one thought one day, they change your mind the next day.
We don't tend to stay at the same stage of development, do we? I think there's maybe a reason that Paul used the metaphor. He says, you're like babies. I was going to give you real food, like that you chew up, but you're not ready for that yet. You can't handle it, and you still need milk because there's a growth. We change. And the weird thing is, growing up, do you have control over growing up? It's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to you whether you want it to or not. But do we have control over growing up spiritually?
Yes.
We so have control over growing up spiritually. We can do things, right? We can do practices. We can read and pray. We can give to the poor. We can, we can do actions that change us spiritually. But physical growth is just going to happen no matter what. All right. That Christianity is like a journey. Bunyan also seems to think Christianity is like a battle. There's lots of fighting in this. People, with serious consequences. Faithful got executed. How is Christianity a battle?
There's always like new threats. There's always something that's fighting against. There's sins that you have to battle against, and just kind of like a journey to heaven.
Is it scriptural to say that the spiritual journey is a battle? Can you think of a place?
Yeah, well, no.
Can you quote?
I don't know, like putting on the armor of God.
Putting on the armor of God. That's that's a very fighting metaphor, isn't it? He doesn't say, put on the, fancy party dress of God. Put on the armor. And as we talked about, interestingly, that armor doesn't have any back armor either, just like Christian didn't have any back armor. Thinking of what do you think? So if I'm thinking of all the things they had to fight. Apollyon, obviously. Sometimes it was fear. That valley of the shadow of death, and there was creepy stuff, and that he was just walking on that little path, and there were screams and voices, and it was terrible. Of course, it would be terrifying to be locked up in a prison and think you were being, condemned to death. Doubting Castle was terrifying. All these terrifying episodes. But then, do not sleep on the enchanted ground. What do you think we're supposed to learn by do not sleep on the enchanted ground? How is that a battle? I guess is where I'm going with that. Sometimes it is hard. Have you all been there? Like you're watching the movie, whatever, but you really want to see it. You just can't. Apparently you should have picked a more exciting movie. So it can be a battle to stay awake, but I think it must mean more than that. Yeah, Dominic. Mm. Ah. It'd be a little bit like just staying in Vanity Fair, wouldn't it? And feeling like, well, I have everything I need here. Do not sleep on the enchanted ground. And this, I'm still meditating on you guys' answers for the waking up thing. Because I'm thinking about how that ending, after he wakes up and goes to sleep again, how it's different. Like do not sleep. Do not be sucked in by atheists. Do not follow the flatter. They sound very much like getting gently sucked into an idea, don't they? That at the beginning, though, Christian is very hardcore, isn't he? No, I must have my scroll. And he's arguing with everybody in the road. Where's your scroll? You climbed in over the wall. You can't be here. And, but then at the end, it's like, oh, stay awake. Oh, what's this guy? This guy tells us to go this path. They're getting sucked away more subtly, maybe? Yeah, what did you want to say, Dominic? Mm.
Because it's everywhere at the same time. Incredibly dangerous because we could easily fall into the monotony of life.
Mm-hmm.
And fall into that path.
We just kind of spiritually nod off, don't we? And go on autopilot. It's just going to be fine. Just do the same thing over and over every day. It's like John Bunyan has a lot to teach us about the Christian life. I'm going to wrap up one more thing, but does anybody have anything you'd like to explore or add, or an episode in here that was particularly interesting to you, or was completely unintelligible to you before I add my final thing? I had to do a little searching. Oh, yeah, Jonathan, go ahead.
Related, but I read Christiana's part, and
Oh, yeah.
noticed that along the whole series of the part, all the characters aged completely.
Mm,
Like Christiana had like young sons in the beginning, because it says he calls them children,
yeah.
and at the end they're all married and have kids of their own. And I was just wondering why that.
Well, it's been a while since I've read Christiana's part, but I do remember that there was a lot of waiting to get the call to the celestial city, wasn't there? They got there, it's like, well, you gotta wait now. And, I always picture it as her husband is already gone, right? And sometimes our part is to wait with patience till it's our turn to cross the river, if you know what I mean. And I always picture that she's been waiting for years. If you picture that she never physically went anywhere, this is kind of hard to keep both of these things in your mind. She didn't leave a city and go to a city, but she's changed internally, but she's waiting. And she's waited for decades to go join him. But you're right, we get the impression in the first part that it happened quickly because he still seems fairly young. We don't get any indication of aging, do we, of Christian in the first part. So maybe Bunyan just thought that over, and you probably noticed some other things, like they have a whole group, and Christian just is either alone or he has one companion, and she's got Mr. Greatheart and Much Afraid, and all these people, like a whole troop of people traveling. But I don't know. That's a really good question, Jonathan. But in my mind, it gives me this image of, well, it's back to they also serve who only stand and wait. Back to our sonnet, she has to just wait her turn. And she wants to go. I'm ready, But in the meantime, she gets to enjoy her children growing up, and the legacy. Christian, we don't really see him leaving a legacy behind. Then we get to Christian, but he did, because his whole family ends up joining him eventually. So we get to see her legacy a little bit more that she gives to her children. But yeah, I highly recommend. If you're interested, read. It's not difficult, any more difficult to read, and it's got some different. It's got a different flair to it, a different flavor. One thing I wanted to mention that I looked up was Demas. I thought this was very clever, and it was very hidden, and it also tells us how much Bunyan knew about his Bible. While they're traveling, they meet a guy named Demas. And it says, at the farther side of that plain was a little hill called Lucre. Lucre means money. And in that hill, a silver mine, which some of them that had formerly gone that way because of the rarity of it had turned aside to see. But going too near the brim of the pit, the ground being deceitful under them broke, and they were slain. Some also have been maimed there and could not to their dying day be their own men again. Maimed because they wanted to go look at the silver mine. Then I saw in my dream that a little off the road, over against the silver mine, stood Demas, gentlemanlike, to call passengers to come and see, who said to Christian and his fellow, "Ho, turn aside hither, and I'll show you something." Christian says, "What thing so deserving as to turn us out of the way to see it?" "Here's a silver mine, and some digging in it for treasure. If you will come with a little pains, you may richly provide for yourselves." Then said Hopeful, "Let us go see." "Not I," said Christian. "I have heard of this place before now, and how many there have been slain. And besides, that treasure is a snare to those that seek it, for it hindereth them in their pilgrimage." Okay, that's pretty plain, right? Greed takes you off the path. But Demas, who is Demas? So I had to look it up, and it led me to, I didn't put my little flags in. Oh, no, don't tell me. Oh, there it is. Okay. Hold on. Now I got to look it up. Now you're all watching me to see how quick I can look stuff up. No, this is my Bible. Of course, it's the tiny little Colossians. Hold on. Okay, Colossians 4:14. Okay, it says, Colossians 4:14. Our dear friend Luke, the doctor, and Demas send greetings. Give my greetings to the brothers at Laodicea. Okay, that's it. Our good friend Luke and Demas give greetings. Okay, but wait, there's more. Okay, Philemon, verse 24. 23 and 24. Epaphras, my fellow prisoner in Christ Jesus, sends you greetings, as do Mark, Aristarchus, Demas, and Luke, my fellow workers. Okay, so what? 2 Timothy. Timothy, Titus, and Philemon. 4, 9, and 10. Do your best to come to me quickly. For Demas, because he loved this world, has deserted me and has gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, and Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Demas, because he loved this world, has deserted me. It's from those three that Bunyan gets Demas, the guy who sucks you out of the path because he loves the world, in this case, a silver mine. Oh, it's very clever. What were you going to say, Nathan?
I'm just wondering, is this like Nicodemus?
Yeah, I was thinking that.
I was just.
No, I don't. It's spelled differently. Demas with an A, and Nicodemus has a U-S. No, I don't think it's the same person. It sounds like a Greek name to me, but anyway, wow. Just those little verses, like we're going to call him Demas. All right. I hope that you will visit Pilgrim's Progress again, because I suspect that as you get older, you read it again and you will see more things because you will have passed through one of those challenges that maybe you haven't passed through yet. But some of them I'm sure you already have. Okay, we've had 15 minutes left, and I really need to talk to you about Descartes. We are, next week, in addition to reading Milton Sonnets repeatedly, reading all of Descartes' discourse on method. Do you remember that the very first week we were here, I read a little bit about Francis Bacon? And I told you that Francis Bacon was one of the guys that really changed the path of history. This idea that we have to test things scientifically, and if it's not something testable in a lab, it doesn't really exist or it doesn't matter. Our other friend that changed history, maybe not friend, is Descartes. Sadly, I told you how Francis Bacon decided to stuff a chicken or something with snow and caught pneumonia and died. Interestingly, Descartes was also well known as a mathematician and teacher, and Queen Christina of Denmark or Sweden, somewhere north and cold, invited him to come, and she liked to have her philosophy lessons at 5:30 in the morning. And he wasn't there like 6 months, and he also got pneumonia and died. What's up with the cold? What's up with the cold with these people? I don't know. Descartes is, like I said, partly known as a mathematician. So if you're doing any geometry or analytic geometry, if you use a Cartesian plane, if you're familiar with Cartesian, if you're not, you will be. It's named for Descartes, Cartesian Descartes. We're not concerned about him as a mathematician so much in this class as a philosopher. And he decided to I'm going to give too much away because I want you to look it up for yourself. He decided to change how we know things. So what I'd like to do, I'd like you to read his Discourse and Method. I think it's 30 pages, not even 40 pages maybe, but it's kind of dense. And it has 5 or 6, oh, Neil's got his. May I borrow yours, Neil? Yeah, okay, so this is it. And I mean, it's got lots of words. I mean, it's not a conversation or anything. But it's got, how many? It's got 6 parts. So, you know, you have to read more than one part one day, obviously, because if you read for 5 days. Or you could read a part every day, Saturday and Sunday, and get through it. But each part is generally not that hard to follow. Each part is, let's see, oh no, I'm already in part 2. Like six pages? 6 pages, maybe? Thank you, Neil. And I want you to answer the questions in the book. I asked a lot. You see, I've already answered mine, but I asked a lot. I asked them divided by parts. Part 1, part 2. So you know in what 5 or 6 pages to find the answer to whatever question I've asked you. And I tried to make questions that really guided you through what he thought. But the overall thing I'd really like you to search out is what is he proposing that seems different from the way people have thought before? And I also want you to look for one more thing. I didn't ask this question, but I want you to be on the alert for any claims he makes that you think might be suspect. Claims about thinking, claims about the world. So, that's what I mean by that, yeah. That you think aren't true. Does he make unsubstantiated claims about thinking, about the world, about the universe in general? That's what we're looking for. So to help you see, oh, he's looking at how we know things in a different way, I will tell you how, in general, people think we know things before Descartes. First of all, how do you know that Columbus landed in America in 1492? How do you know that?
We have proof.
What?
We got proof. We got documentation. We got a bunch of different stuff proving that.
And who leaves us that documentation? How is this documented?
So, I suppose it's like written down.
It's
Past.
written down. It's written down. So if you believe that the people who wrote it down are telling the truth, then this happened. Okay, how do I know that Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon and attacked Rome and started a civil war? Did I see it? This isn't a trick question. It's, how do I know it happened? Because somebody wrote it down, right? So we call this authority. It's the argument from authority. Somebody wrote it down, and that somebody, I have a really good reason to trust. I have good reason to believe that they told the truth. They just make up the whole story. I'll just believe anybody, but I believe this authority, right? And but can I test Caesar crossing the Rubicon in a lab? No, historical stuff is not scientifically knowable because I can't make it happen again and test it and watch. I can't resurrect him and put him next to the Rubicon and see if he crosses. Maybe he wouldn't again. Maybe he would change his mind the second time. See, I don't know. What did you want to say, Neil?
We could use mathematical equations to measure his weight.
Yes. See if it's possible for him to cross. Will he sink? Will he? No. That's all I can do. And so this is a way that we know things, and it's a way that the ancients and medievals put a lot of stock in. I believe this authority is true and reliable, and therefore I will trust what they say. And of course, for them, the authority in matters of like philosophy and things would be Plato and Aristotle. They didn't, remember, for most of the Middle Ages, they didn't have very much Plato, and they didn't have any Aristotle to speak of till 1200 or so. But after it started flowing in, after Constantinople fell and people started coming west, they had that, and so they trusted it. They thought these people who have thought about these issues are smart, and I trust them. So here's what I would like you to be on the lookout for. What does Descartes want to trust? Does he want to trust authority, or does he have another something he's going to trust? If so, what is it? And what problem does he have with authority? Do you want to say something, Neil? Go ahead. Oh, you were going to answer it. Okay, sorry. Yeah, take your time. This, guys, this might be the most important book we read this year. It might be one of the most boring to you. Totally going to warn you about that. But honestly, if we're calling this the rise of the modern world, this class, Descartes is huge. And so work your way through. I ask you a lot of questions, mostly because there's a lot of things I didn't want you to not notice. Okay, so please answer them. Yeah, and just see if you agree wholeheartedly with Descartes, or if he ever says anything that you say, wait a minute, Mr. Descartes, how are you going to prove that? That doesn't make sense, okay? Yes, Neil, go ahead.
Was he existing around the time of the Enlightenment?
Yes, very early, on the early end. So more 1600s, and we think of the like the early 1700s as being full-blown Enlightenment, but definitely, this is happening, and he's one of the, he and Francis Bacon are one of the two of the driving forces of the Enlightenment, definitely. After we read this, we're going to read Gulliver's Travels. Well, no, in a few weeks we're going to read Gulliver's Travels, okay? And Bacon and Descartes gave rise to a lot of what we're going to encounter, because Gulliver's Travels is full out Enlightenment mode, okay? Yeah, what they talk about. The storyline and what they talk about is very Enlightenment. So, all right, are there any questions? Oh, I didn't tell you what to write. Why were there no questions? Mrs. Ferguson, we want to write. Okay, it's easy. So some of you have, almost everybody has done this before for me, except poor Noah, who always gets called out. It's like, but except for him. So I do things, I call it a summa. And basically, I throw a question out there and you write me one paragraph. 250 to 300 words. No, I mean, I'll read it if you write more than that. But I figure it's going to take you at least that long to answer the question. I don't think it's going to be a one-sentence question, right? And just bring it in, just one paragraph. Tell me what you think about this question. Here's your question. Is allegory an effective storytelling tool? Why or why not? Do you approve of allegory? You know, Bunyan started his book with that apology. Well, I don't know. People were saying I shouldn't write an allegory. Maybe I shouldn't publish this book, but I think I should. So he says yes. Obviously, Bunyan would say, yes, it is an effective storytelling tool. So I guess what I'm looking for is, what do you think of allegory? Especially as regards to Christian teaching or spiritual teaching. Do you approve, or are you with those naysayers? No, you shouldn't have published this book. Allegory is bad and wrong. All right? Just tell me what you think. Bring that to me next week. I'll have your sonnets back for you. And yeah, one paragraph, 250 to 300 words, just a summa, the one paragraph. And I will see you next week. Bye, guys.